Question is, okay, let's say we are maybe entering a little bit of inflation. What indicators are we looking for that's going to give us that little, edge to start early and make changes that we might need to make? Anybody?
Yeah, Scott, I'll tell you two of the things that I look at more than anything, and that is I look at the velocity of money spreading through our system. It isn't enough for the printing presses to run. Money supply is a function of money times velocity. That's all complicated, but what it really means is if the money hits the bank and sits there, we don't have anything going on, including jobs. If there's no demand to borrow that money, and there hasn't been, and just sitting there, so the velocity right now is close to 1, which is as low as it can get. And in the good old days, it was 7. So if you have $100 times 7, that means you've got $700 worth of action. If you've got $200 in money supply and it's just sitting there, you don't have any action. So the velocity of money switching through the banks is the number one thing. And the other new thing, and this is something that I don't think a lot of people are looking at, but it's going to be the big, big, big thing in the future, in my opinion. And that is the activities of private equity, angel type of investors, the private capital folks that are funding money into brand new small businesses. Right now, if you had to ask what my number one thing I was paying attention to, it would be that. And there are reports on that. You can see that. But if I were you and if I were looking for guidelines, that's what I would be watching. In the heyday, Scott, I think it was like $100 billion or some huge number. It's dropped off to now in the latest quarter it was like $3 billion. Well, let's just watch that pick up. That's where the real financing is coming from right now.
I'll just add one other point, and it's based on a conversation I just had this morning where there's so much confusion because there's no clarity. There's no clarity on policy. There's no clarity on taxes. There's no definitive path that has been laid out for this $1 trillion in cash on the balance sheets of all these major corporations. Somebody that's not in this room tonight put it pretty simply this morning. He said, you give me some clarity. You give me some facts that I can actually believe in and that I can get behind, some reliable information and some data, and I'll start making good decisions. And I think that goes across a lot of different areas, not just the business owner community. But if you read what is going on, there's some things in the paper just this morning about some CEOs with some comments, and it mirrors their concern. They're reticent to go ahead and allocate the money. Do they put it into certain areas like R&D and spending, or do they go hire people? And because they don't have a clear-cut way as to the advantages or disadvantages of doing one or the other, it really puts them in a quandary.
He had one more word in that conversation.
He did, but my mic is on.
Oh, okay.
And it is a family show.
It was a little more saucy than that.
A little
actually.
saucy.
Yeah, it was a little saucy.
Yeah, and just to add another thing, this lack of clarity. Nobody knows if we're going to have Bush tax cuts extended or not. Nobody knows how Obamacare, and not a political statement, that's what they're calling it, how that's going to affect the business owner. And the rising costs, even though it didn't really address the main thing, which is rising healthcare costs. I made a joking statement, but I think it's absolutely true today, that the reason the market's been rallying over the last month, last 21 days, is I think it's because 23 Democrats said, hey, I don't think we should raise taxes right now. And so, and that's not a political statement, but the market said, well, hey, maybe there's not going to be tax increases next year. Maybe they will extend it for one more year. A little more clarity, I think the market adjusted. Now, there's other factors, but I think as soon as they do see clarity, as soon as they see safety in deploying those assets, we see private sector jobs increasing at a more feverish rate than 50,000 jobs a month, you'll start seeing activity. And when that happens, now it's a different game. Now you need to start looking at how do you throttle back the money faucet and do it successfully.
when Scott raised his hand, I saw another little hand pop up, this young lady right here. Question is, when do